Hi there. Yep, I know, it's been an awful long while. And I know I did say that I wasn't actually sure if I was going to do a review of Blood of My Blood. And I decided why not. I thought I might as well look at the first couple of episodes of the show and just see what I thought. And I will say up front that I actually kind of avoided finding out pretty much anything about this show going in that was at all avoidable. A little bit more on that later. But wait, before I go any further, I should probably just mention that Blood of My Blood is a spin-off from Outlander. Now, I'm guessing if you're watching the channel and you've watched Blood of My Blood, you probably know that. But just in case anybody else randomly wandered into this video with no idea what it was about, it's a spin-off prequel to Outlander. Beyond that, I knew almost nothing going in, so let's just get on with what happened in the first couple of episodes. The first pair of episodes tells the story of two couples, setting up the timelines and the major characters. Episode 1 is set in the 1720s, telling the story of Ellen. She's the daughter of Red Dead Jacob, and the sister of Colum and Dougal. Sound familiar? Well, that'll be clear later. And she ends up having like an illicit Romeo and Juliet style secret romance in the brewing with Brian Fraser, the bastard son of Lord Lovett of Leather, which is apparently his actual title and not his kinky drag queen name. And basically there's a whole big Kingsmoot kind of succession thing going on, and that's all in the wake of Dead Jacob, and they're also having a gathering at the same time, during which Ellen meets Brian, goes off for a wee secret chat, only, unfortunately, everybody else thinks she's been raped by this guy, Grant, for reasons, so Dougal decides to just beat the crap out of him, and that leaves everything a little bit sticky. The second episode takes us to the 1910s, where Henry Beecham is being awfully heroic in the trenches and also getting kind of depressed and gloomy at the sadness and the death, and writing letters to the papers about it. But then Julia, eventually also to be Beecham, is the person who's back home censoring those letters, and she ends up getting moved to reply to him, leading to them striking up a correspondence, and eventually meeting up, tossing themselves into bed, getting hitched, and then having a wee clear sprog before they go off on their hollybobs together. And after having a quick roll in the hay, or on a blanket, they end up having a freak car crash that sends them skiting off up to the stone circle where they travel back in time. Julia ending up getting lost and abducted to becoming a maidservant for Leathery Lovett, and Henry ending up becoming a bladier, which is kind of like a consigliere for these Grant folks. So, there you go. That's kind of what happens. Now, okay, I know what you're thinking. You're going to turn around and say, hang on a minute, hang on. Lots more stuff happened than that in the 2.5 hours that comprised the first two episodes. But the plain fact is, other than the show establishing the baseline of who each of the characters essentially is, how they relate to each other, and introducing them all and the locations, there really wasn't that much more to this. Not in these first two episodes. But more than that, there's an added issue where this is so unashamedly a spin-off show. It's so unashamedly Outlander prequel, marketed and devised for fans of Outlander rather than a new audience, that it feels a little bit moot to dither over some of these particulars, because most of them, as I said, aren't really that interesting, short of me going through a big list and saying, oh look, it's this character, who is this character? So what did I think? Well, okay, number one, the premise. I went into this with no idea what it was about other than what I'd learned in the run-up to it from just watching the occasional snippets and hearing little comments and things while looking at stuff to do with Outlander's previous season for the review videos I did. Which was essentially that it was a story of Jamie and Claire's respective parents and their love stories. One being Ellen and Brian, the other being Claire's parents, whose names I continually forget because they don't really get mentioned very much in Outlander, other than they died in a car crash, oh no, what a shame. And up until about a week before I saw these first episodes, I didn't actually know there was going to be a time travel aspect to this show. And you're probably thinking, that's a little silly of me, and it probably was. But honestly, I genuinely thought this was just going to be two love stories told contrastingly, one in the 1720s, the other one during World War I. But then I literally caught a snippet online of the actress playing Julia in the past, and I thought, oh, that's disappointing. But then it also seems quite inevitable because you're going to do an Outlander with an Outlander show. So I kind of got over that. I thought, well, it'll be interesting to see how they do it. And I actually like the idea that they're trying to tell these love stories. Because, a love story is a good story. It's the basis for so much in terms of like stories and films and TV shows and books. There's a reason romantasy is currently the top-selling type of book in fiction. And I like the idea that this one is also set back in the 1720s. We're back in Scotland. We're doing the clan stuff. We're doing all the clan rivalry. We've got a succession thing going on here, which is pretty interesting. I mean, think about your Game of Thrones or your House of the Dragon or Shogun or literally Succession. All these good shows that were all about that kind of thing, all about struggles for power. It's fertile ground for drama. And here we've got young versions of Dougal and Colum who are sparring for power. You've got young Ned trying to cool their heads, and the show absolutely beating us over the head every 10 seconds about how Ellen really ought to be the one in charge, but unfortunately because of bad sexism that won't happen. Similarly, it's really nice to get back to Castle Leich. I mean, there is something inherently nice about seeing all these old locations back from season 1 of Outlander. And I've long said that one of the biggest problems of Outlander is that after season 3, the show gets so obsessed with the New World and with American history that it forgets that one of the biggest draws of the story is Scotland and time travel and, castles and kilts and stuff. And it's great fun to literally do a retread of The Gathering, of episode 4 of season 1, which was probably one of the most fun and interesting episodes of season 1. And not only that, we're getting to see Jamie's parents hanging about and getting up to hijinks. And speaking of hijinks, it was nice to see these characters we know, old and young. It was kind of silly, but this little scene with young Rupert and young Angus, played by the real-life sons of the actors who played them in the original show. I mean, that's a fun wee quirk. Although, it did confuse me a bit because I kind of assumed that those characters were supposed to be a lot closer in age to Jamie than to Jamie's parents, so that threw me a little bit because, by rights, I thought they shouldn't have been born yet. But in general, the casting of this has been fantastic. You've got the younger versions of like the brothers, but then also Murtagh or Ned the lawyer, Aunt Jocasta, or guys like Archbug. Archbug, who, a much bigger character in the book by all accounts, not really very much in the TV show, was just basically turned up a wee bit and then got dead. But now we actually get to see him as a young man, and he's probably going to be a fairly pivotal character. Also, it was fun seeing Tony Curran, the legendary insane Tony Curran, turning up as the young version of Lord Lovett, which was kind of inspired casting. Also the same for the leads. I don't need to tell anybody that Jamie Roy looks and acts so much like Sam Heughan, it's uncanny. He really does look like they could be related. Similarly, Hermione Corfield, who I remember from the movie The Road Dance, which I think I reviewed back in 2021 on one of my Movies by Month videos, she looks so much like Katrina Balfe that it's spooky. And she also does a very good sort of received pronunciation London upper crust accent.
I like to blow my own trumpet, but it seems I am quite the horologist.
That does kind of sound a little bit borderline on parody, which, does fit, but I did worry a little bit in some scenes that if she felt a bit more like somebody doing a cosplay of Claire rather than being a character in her own right, so we'll have to see how that one pans out. The other two, though, they're fine. Harriet Slater as Ellen, she actually gets a hell of a lot of screen time in the first episode, and she does fairly well with what she has to work with, which unfortunately isn't a lot. She's not really given much meat to work with. It's just a lot of kind of being a bit annoyed, and then not. And the same goes to Jeremy Irvin as Henry. He's very much doing a bit of gruff soldiery, and then like, I'm a bit confused, what's going on? I'm very English. And yeah, on a side note, I'm really interested to see what his acting and performance is like going forward, because he's actually been cast in the new Silent Hill movie that comes out in January, and I am a big fan of the Silent Hill video games. And Silent Hill 2, which is the game that the movie he's in is based on, is one of the best horror video games of all time. So, colour me very intrigued to see if he's going to be an actor I'm going to look forward to seeing, or be sad that he was cast. Also, this being Outlander, all the great lovely costume stuff and the props, and as I said, the locations all look fantastic. It's got that lovely lived-in sort of quality that you would expect from Outlander. Although this is the first season that I would say that I thought that the wigs and the hair looked decidedly like wigs and dyed hair, which does lead me into a few of the problems the show had. And the wigs alone are just a symptom, I think, of a larger problem that I'm sensing, and that's that there's a very rushed feel to this. There's some special effects and background shots in this that look very wonky. There's also some really weird choices, like this really, really strange shot when Julie gets thrown in the back of a wagon and they just speed up the shot. Now, I didn't speed this up. This is what it looks like. It's just a shot of a wagon that they've gone, we want that to move faster of shot, so they've just cranked it up to like double the speed. Also, I mean, the shot where they actually crash the car, I mean, it goes from quite a slow broom broom to looking like it's going about 110 miles an hour in about a second. Yeah, and then there's the decapitated head at the end of season 2. I mean, I was saying the props and that look good, but it looks like the fake head that it is. And this show seems to have a real issue. I don't know if they just go to the bad fake head shop or something, but it was like when they had the fake dead Gaius in season 4 of Outlander, it just looked really bad. There's also some pretty basic and even some slightly shoddy looking cinematography. There was this weird conversation where they shot both Ned and Henry exactly at the same angle, even though they're on opposite sides of a wagon, which is breaking the 180 degree rule, and it looks really weird because it doesn't look like they're talking to each other properly. And I know that it's technically correct because they are both sitting on opposite sides of the wagon, but there's a reason that in TV shows you shoot reverse shot, and that's so that it doesn't confuse the audience. And you could imagine, maybe it's thematically to say that really they're on the same page, even though they're on opposite sides. Maybe that's what it's trying to imply, or maybe that's me just trying to find a reason to justify what is a really, really bad, really basic mistake. It's also worth noting that during the editing of this video, I noticed on one of the promo videos for the show in these episodes, they actually did turn it the right way around. So there you go. Somebody somewhere knew how this should have looked. But more than that, there's one really big problem with this show. The script. Now, anyone who's followed my reviews of every single episode of Outlander from the very beginning will know that I have had issues with the writing here and there and more as it's gone on. And frankly, my heart sank a wee bit when I saw the first episode was written by Matt Roberts. Now, Matt Roberts has been on the show since the first episode. He's been a producer, he's been one of the main creatives on this, and he said that many times on the podcasts and commentaries and things that he's the one who usually writes Claire's voiceovers, like right since episode 1. And they've been rubbish since episode 1. And now he's the showrunner of the show. And clearly, he comes from the Garth Marenghi school of writing.
I know writers who use subtext, and they're all cowards.
Now, right, there's not a hint of subtext at any point in this show. Every single character spends all of their screen time stating and restating their one or two character aspects and their one-note motivations. Take Colum and Dougal. Like, in case you don't remember, the feuding laird and his brash but proud brother, the show is going to remind you again and again that Colum is very smart but disabled, and Dougal is big and strong but thick and angry, and that Colum is disabled and Dougal is angry. And did I mention that Colum is disabled? Because about half the time all that Dougal says to him, other than "I should be laird," is "you're a cripple." And it's so blunt, and it treats the audience like they're thick and that they might not be following this. And it's so bizarre because there's also so much key jangling in this. There's so many attempts to say, look, we know you love this, so here's a thing, here's a mention of a thing, here's this person, here's that person. Oh look, here's a young version of this character that you loved from before. It's crazy that then they have to spend all their time holding the audience's hand just in case the same people might have forgotten who these characters who were in the other show are and what they think and how they act. And I don't get it. But this just feels like the absolute worst kind of bad soap opera writing. And at the same time, it's got every hint of prequelitis that a show or a film could have. So where does that leave us? Well, it leaves the show in a weird place where 2 episodes in, one of which was extra length, and yet it feels like it's barely started. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I made that whole thing about the only describing what basically happens in it is because, as I said, it feels that way. It also has other kind of problems inherent to prequel spin-offs, prequelitis, as I said. Now, you can do a good prequel spin-off. I mean, I'm assured by people who've seen it that Better Call Saul is actually better than Breaking Bad, which is a pretty high bar. And I've seen season 1 and I quite liked it, but I can't really comment on it being better than Breaking Bad. But the plain fact is, prequels are hard to do. I mean, think about it. You had shows like Dune Prophecy, which came out. You know, I really like the Dune movies. I think they're fantastic. And I got bored 2 episodes into Dune Prophecy because it was plagued by very similar issues of being pretty flatly directed, poorly written, and kind of boring. Even though it had amazing actors, it had beautiful CGI and great costumes and sets, it was just really, really tragically dull. The same problem with Battlestar Galactica's prequel, Caprica, which was essentially a fairly boring story of a bunch of rich people on a future planet building robots in their spare time, and had none of the interesting sides of Battlestar Galactica that people enjoyed. And this is a show that feels like it's trying way, way too hard to make you think of Outlander, while hammering out a show that's not actually very interesting. Now, I also know that they shot this back-to-back with the final season of Outlander, which, I suppose means that there is a possibility that at some point in this show, or in the other show, we might get a cameo from characters from one to the other. But also means they were probably fighting over resources to get both shows shot, just from practicality. I mean, as we've seen with the last 2 or 3 seasons of Outlander, that's a show that's been floundering in terms of wrangling a book story to TV, and also managing to be fun to watch. And, well, I mean, they don't have that story problem here, because as far as I know, this isn't actually adapted from any books or short stories or anything. But maybe that's the problem, because what is the story here? I mean, clearly they're doing multiple seasons of this, so I imagine Julia and Henry aren't going to be zipping back in time anytime soon. And to be honest, considering they're thought to be dead, and Claire never mentioned their parents magically reappearing into the 20th century or something, then I don't think they're going to be coming back. But the show also needs to make sure it doesn't break the logic of Outlander by having someone find out something they shouldn't know. Although, at least if there's a Beecham hanging around Castle Leak, it explains how Colm knows how to pronounce Claire's surname back in season 1. Although, I imagine the show will probably hammer that down the audience's throats so that we don't miss that, later down the line. But it does leave a lot of interesting options open in terms of, for Henry and Julia, because does that mean that they die in the past? Unlikely, but, could happen. But what about the baby? Like, she's pregnant. If the baby survives, oh god, the baby isn't going to turn out to be that old French dude. I hope not. Ugh, timey-wimey. And I have to say, I'm just not really impressed by it. I mean, I was really full of hope. I mean, especially at the prospect of there being a bunch of World War I stuff. Because, I like me some World War I stuff. I mean, kicking the thing off in Passchendaele with some trench fighting. But really, it was just a tiny little bit of World War I paint slapped on a trite romance story. I mean, unless they're planning on following up something like Henry's PTSD moment, which I'll be surprised if they even bothered revisiting. If you do want to watch something like that, see if you can dig out an old copy of this film called Regeneration. It's absolutely fantastic. It's set in Scotland, it's about the First World War, and it's about the real-life poets Siegfried Sassoon and Wilfred Owen. I've mentioned it before in various videos. Watch it, it's actually really good. Also, there is a movie called Passchendaele, made by the guy who bizarrely used to be in Due South, if anybody remembers Due South. Yeah, well, that guy apparently took most of the money that he made on multiple seasons of Due South, and his big project was to do a thing about the Canadians during World War I. And it's okay. But yeah, both of those I would say are probably a better time than watching at least these first 2 episodes of Blood of My Blood, or Bomb, if you spell it out. Although I have noticed in interviews and things, they seem to refer to it as Bob, presumably because somebody at some point realised that if you call it Bomb, people might realise it's as bad as it is. Anyway, there's not really much more for me to say. I haven't watched any more of it as of yet. I have some free time coming up, so I might sit down and watch the next few episodes just to see if it gets any better. But thus far, I am really unimpressed. So, what have you thought? Feel free to leave a comment in the comments. Have you watched Blood of My Blood? Does it stack up to Outlander? Have you even not bothered at all? Until next time, these have been my grumpy opinions.